But in a situation where you find that a person look at the situation,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, welcome back and thank you for staying with us. If you're just joining us, you're watching Daybreak on Trust TV and it's time for the newspaper review. Let's take a look at the stories on the dailies this morning. We'll begin with Daily Trust newspaper. The lead story here says bloodbath in Southeast. Police mobilize against IPOP terror. And we have writers here that says how 24 were killed in Imo, Enugu, others. Witnesses and Miete Allah. We are in panic, says Northerners and Southeast. Division in separatist group over sit-at-home order. And agitators digging abysmal pits for themselves, says Ohaneze. And you can find details of that story on page 4. 89 trillion naira stamp duty recovery move sparks controversy. We also have new cashless policy will discourage rigging, says Sanusi. 13 injured, 23 houses razed in Jigawa herders attack, and you can find details of that story on page 6. We also have a pictorial of a funeral prayer in Jos, the Plateau State capital, for one of the people killed by gunmen at Omona in Imo State yesterday, and the deceased picture inserted, and his name is Awal Abdul Salam. We also have gunmen abduct 16 wedding guests in the Federal Capital Territory. Details on page 12. Ganduje's ex-men to lead NNPP's governorship campaign in Kano. And we also have bandits kill 21 in Bauchi and Katsina states. These are some of the stories on Daily Trust newspaper.
Okay, up next is our leadership newspaper, where the lead story says 2023 Tinubu hits back at Atiku over Security Watch comment. And the story has riders ask Nigerians to be wary of PDP candidates' sugar-coated promises. You are unfit to be president, Atiku replies, pledges prudent use of security vote at Channels TV's The People's Town Hall. And just below the lead story, we have photo of President Muhammadu Buhari, Katsina State Governor Aminu Masari, and Bauchi State Governor Bala Mohammed shortly before departing Katsina State for Washington, D.C. ahead of U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit yesterday. And of course, at the top of the page, Nigeria's think tank Agora Policy decries exclusion of women, youth. Details of that story is on page 7. And then Presidency Committee differ on trapped 89.09 trillion stamp duties. Then below the masthead, investors abandon 250 billion auto gas projects intervention fund. By the right of the page, PAP, that is a presidential amnesty program to absorb ex-agitators in MDA's security agencies. Details of that story is on page 7. And lastly, iPhone users to pay $11 per month for Twitter blue checkmark. Story on page 19. So these are some of the stories in today's leadership newspapers.
All right, let's move on to the Nation newspaper. We have the lead story here saying Wike, same faith, not reason to dump South candidates. And we have writers on that story that says Tinubu Shatima, tickets will be fair to all. I'll reset economy for faster growth, says Tinubu, and President drums up support for APC candidates. We also have Ipman to get petrol direct from NNPCL. Oil giant in move to end product shortage, and you can find details of that story on page 8. At the top of the page there, Lekki Deep Sea Port promoters shop for $800 million to link rail line. Presidency defends Emefiele over alleged 89.1 trillion naira stamp duty collection. We also have INEC begins PVC distribution today. Niger Delta slam Atiku for sending Okowa to Jonathan. And just below the name plate there, nobody can split G5 allies, says Bode George. And writers here says Tambuwal's overture to autumn futile, and I won't vote for Atiku, says PDP chieftain vows. We also have pay salary arrears owed by Aregbe Shola, Oshun workers tell Adeleke, and NDLEA seizes drugs in powdered milk, baby food at Lagos airport. These are some of the stories on the Nation newspaper.
Up next is Punch newspaper, and the major story for this for today is withdrawal limits will cripple campaign fund, say parties. Parties to write CBN for waiver say cashless policy will choke political process fundraising. If Buhari had no access to funding in 2014, he would never have been president, says PDP. Policy will create logistic problems. Paying party agents nationwide will be difficult, say ADC and ADP. And then just below that, oil production hits 1.18 million barrels per day, highest in 7 months. Story on page 29. On the top of the page, 439 foreign trained doctors failed assessment exam, says MDCN, that is Medical and Dental Health Council of Nigeria. I can't understand Boko Haram phenomenon, says Atiku. 33 states lack landfills, dispose waste openly, according to a report. And then debt servicing to gulp 123% of 2023 revenue. Coming down on the page, there is a picture showing choir of the Apostolic Faith Church in 2022 Christmas concert at Jabi, Abuja on Sunday, and below that, NNPC raises major oil marketers from 7 to 27. 15 drug dealers caught in notorious Lagos community. These are stories on the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning.
All right, next is Vanguard newspaper, and the lead story here says 2023, Atiku Tambuwal to in verbal war over bid for power and wealth. We also have the writers here that says Tinubu's rags to riches story hogwash. It says Atiku's aid. My experience, democratic credentials prepared me for presidency, says Atiku. Why Tinubu is not fit to be Nigeria's president. Beware of Atiku's sugar-coated promises, says Tinubu, says I'll be a fair, just president to Nigerians, vows to end poverty, insecurity. Seems to be a war of words here. All right, so there is a pictorial of motor insurance and why NICOM and insurers backpedaled on planned 50% premium hike. That's an inside story. Hike approved, awaiting minister's approval. Only 3 million of 12 million vehicles have valid insurance. Premium income reverses upward trend, falls 36% in second quarter 2022. And just below that infograph there, on 625 billion naira refunds, SERAP gives 9 oil-producing states 7 days to disclose spending. On the second Niger bridge here, we have heavy-duty vehicles won't use it for now, says FRSC. Nigeria's polarization worrisome, says Kuka, others. 6 dead, 25 injured in Kogi auto crash. At the top of the page, we have more stories. Security threats to 2023 polls. How to end attacks on INEC facilities, say security experts. We also have PDP crisis, not war of attrition, but political disagreement, says Tambuwal. On $2 billion trapped funds, operations of more foreign airlines under threat. Niger Delta Group sue Buhari, others over NDDC board as Warri Council of Chiefs urges president to recall fresh list. And just below that story, unemployability of Nigerian graduates worrisome, says federal government. And we just have a few more stories on Vanguard newspaper. Anti-thuggery committee demolishes APC campaign office in Gusau. Details of that story on page 25. And stamp duty recovery. Buhari panel legitimate, scribe replies Garba Shehu. And these are some of the stories on Vanguard newspaper.
Okay, up next is We're moving on to Guardian newspaper, where the top story this morning says foreign airlines retain 200% high fares. Stranded fund hits $551 million. The story has some more details. Tough choices for travelers with 2 million, 3 million naira economy class tickets. Nigeria tops countries with highest block funds globally. Carriers got $120 million, not $265 million from CBN, says IATA. Lawmakers urge understanding as travel experts tax FG on obligations to airlines. Analysts prompt Buhari on Nigeria's priority ahead of U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. And on top of the page, The Guardian wins sports other awards at them. Then Nigeria, third improved country on African visa openness ranking. Story on page 3. And terrorists attack Kaduna, Katsina communities. Story on page 9. And then lastly, 2 Borno councils under Boko Haram control, according to the Speaker, I think, of the State Assembly. Details of that story is on page 2. Well, that's it for Guardian newspaper this morning.
All right, so next is Daily Independent newspaper, and we have the lead story here that says federal government's tight fiscal policies in 2023 may put businesses on edge. We have a writer that says analysts say they will lead to more cases of job cuts. And at the top of the page there, APGA asks members to boycott stakeholders meeting called by Soludo. And North retaining presidency after Buhari worse than Muslim ticket, says Wike. Below the pictorial there, we have PDP crisis. Tambuwal moves to broker peace between G5 and party leadership. AI condemns military invasion of Rivers community, demands prosecution of security operatives involved. And below that story, Tinubu's allies worry over Buhari's attitude to 2023 presidential poll, says president backing Tinubu but won't make poll do or die affair, says Keyamo. We also have Anambra government assures returnees of safety at Christmas. Details of that on page 29. And on the footnote there, we have NDLEA intercepts Brazil returnee with parcels of cocaine, others in powdered milk and baby food. These are the stories on Daily Independent.
Up next is the Daily Sun newspaper, which is our last paper for this morning. No going back on Obi, Middle Belt Forum says Obasanjo Adebanjo Obi extol Modo at 70. Details of that story is on page 47. And below that, NDLEA arrests Brazil returnee with parcels of cocaine in baby food at Lagos Airport. Story on page 5. Tinubu Atiku fight dirty. That's the major story this morning on the Sun newspaper. He will destroy Nigeria, APC candidate warns. You are not fit to rule, says PDP candidate. And below that, there is a picture showing former President Olusegun Obasanjo with Governor Ifeanyi Ugwuanyi of Enugu State, presidential candidate of Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, and former President General Ohaneze Ndibo, and the celebrant Chief Sir John Inia Nwodo, second left, and leader of Afenifere Chief Ayo Adebanjo at the Thanksgiving Mass to mark Nwodo's birthday at St. Mulumba Catholic Church, New Haven, Enugu, yesterday. And below that, the retaining presidency in the north is as bad as Muslim ticket. Story on page 46. And then PDP crisis, not war, but misunderstanding, Temple tells Autumn. At Obiora Okonko's book launch, Anyim, Saraki, Nwosu, others push for true federalism. Details of that story is on page 46. And then Boko Haram, there is no forest in Sambisa, says Atiku. The CEO, Imo governor at 64, 3 years in office, Buhari and I. It's an interview, I think, on page 45 and 44 and 45. And then lastly, on the front page of the Sun newspaper this morning, Attack on police, Enugu CP orders personnel to remain in barracks. Story on page 5. These are details of the stories on the front page of the Sun newspaper. And with that, we wrap up, the looking at the pages of these newspapers, and we'll be going into analysis of some of the major stories that made it to the front pages this morning. And we'll be joined shortly by Mukhtar Suleiman, a public affairs analyst, and with him we'll be analyzing some of these major news stories.
All right, well, Mukhtar is already, has already joined us. He's a public affairs analyst, and his name is Mukhtar Suleiman. Hello, good morning, Mukhtar. Thank you for joining us this morning. All right, so let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. Now, there seems to be a lot of stories on security on Daily Trust and some other papers this morning, like we have that of the 13 injured and 23 houses razed in Jigawa herders attack. We also have that of gunmen abducting 16 wedding guests in the FCT, bandits killing 21 in Bauchi and Katsina, and then the lead story that talks about the bloodbath in Southeast and police mobilizing against IPOB terror. Where are we on tackling security now, as of now?
Good morning. First things first, I want to apologize for not in person today. I had a very long flight yesterday, coming back into the country, and it was, I think I'm still exhausted from it. Basically, I think talking about this is the Jigawa state story. We know how sort of secured, if I can put it that way, Jigawa over the years in the face of that has actually ravaged the northern part of the country for over a decade now, and seeing that area, and I'm hoping that the state governor can actually swing into action as much as Sule Lamido did when the first wave of attacks started. That aside, I think the government needs to do significantly well in terms of curbing insecurity. They should, for being honest. And the thing that they're doing as much as they're doing well, but they are. We need to actually check that with the security arm of the government, because the insecurity is encroaching into other places, and that is not something that we want, especially to the general. They have to guarantee safety of lives and properties of people as we're going to go to the ballot boxes to cast. Guys, I don't know how that's going to play out eventually, but I'm hoping that.
Okay. Mukhtar, if you look at another issue that is also very much prominent in all this is how the killings and maybe the attacks are spread, like from Bauchi in the southeast, in the northeast, to Katsina, to Jigawa, and then of course the southeast now with this IPOB reign of terror. With this, can we say that do we have adequate security men to respond to these killings, to this insecurity that spread quite far apart from each other?
Understand the context of Nigeria's insecurity program. People said great effort by one group how they can actually lead the state. But I think it has more to do with the non-channel government and the security infrastructures than it has to do with the which is something that we need. Like this is actually well coordinated. It isn't. The southern part of the country have their own grievance and what they are the issues that the southeastern parts rather have their own issues that they are dealing in terms of insecurity. The northern they also have their issues that they also in terms of insecurity. And find out what the nexus is and how to actually nip it in the bud, because this is actually escalating beyond. How do I put this? It's actually growing. It's a growing tension. It's a growing issue that needs to actually be looked into by the federal government, and how sparse it has become, especially earlier, we're going into the general elections. We need to ensure that there is actually adequate security infrastructure for people to safe. Okay, it's okay for them to go out to go and cast their franchise.
All right, now, just to add up to what you're saying, a few state governments have actually pledged safety, this December. We have on opinion on page 16 of Daily Trust, Arigbe Shola's pledge on safety by December, and also the Anambra state government pledging safety by December. Now, on the editorial here, we have CBN before implementing withdrawal limit policy. And I would like to link that on the lead story, with the lead story on the Punch newspaper that talks about withdrawal limits, will cripple campaign funding, says political parties. And they say that it will create logistics problem. Paying party agents nationwide will also be difficult. What's your take on this?
I don't think it's as difficult as they're actually saying that it could be. Conversation with one of my friends when the policy just came out, and I was telling them that nobody is saying you cannot spend up to 1 billion in a day. They are just saying make sure that it is done via mobile banking. Make sure so that there's a trail and there's of the money. And the money can also be taxed, of course. Taxing is also a very important part of this whole procedure of the policy. But we know how illicit financial works in election financing. If you know that you're not doing anything illegally, have a wiring to people that you actually say you want to actually give money to. Yes, we have a large number of people that are unbanked in the country. I agree with, but systems and structure. So if this policy is there as a system and as a structure, what it simply means is that those people that are unbanked will become banked. They'll be forced to become banked because that's what the policy is going to do. It's going to increase the people that are not that don't have banking bank, and so
that are on
it's going
bank
to
that are
ensure
not
that we
covered
can
by
actually trace. It's going to ensure that we can actually trace money that are actually that are actually being used within the economy. So I actually think it's a very good policy. Yes, will it affect election financing? Of course, but I think it's for the good. That will how much campaign police for campaign, where the monies are going to. It's easy for us to actually track illicit financial flow in election financing, which is a very big problem because I remember that we had a meeting with the Code of Conduct Bureau some weeks ago about this illicit financial flow when it comes to election financing. And they were telling us that it's as if there's a deliberate effort by the National Assembly to ensure that they don't have adequate resources to actually track these things because they don't have money for anything. They don't have a printer in that office. So we have to do more if the entire sector can come together to actually support the CCB in this act, then it's actually a very good thing. So I actually do think that this is actually a good policy, and it should actually. I hope the BN does not actually for the pressure that they actually receive from the political parties.
All right. Just before Abdulaziz takes the next story, we'll just breeze through the city and crime page. We have gunmen abducting 16 wedding guests in the FCT as well. We have 6 killed, 25 injured in Kogi auto crash. Man, 75 years, arrested for defiling 4-year-old niece in Nasarawa. And I beat my neighbor for pretending to be a pastor. We also have on Xmas, police bans firework in Edo State, and police arrest 2 robbery suspects in Kwara. We also have pregnant woman, others nabbed with hemp cocaine. These are some of the stories on City and Crime of Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
Yeah, the world full of so many crimes. And well, moving on to Punch newspaper, and there is this story, Mukhtar, that says oil production hits 1.18 million barrels per day, highest in 7 months. Would you say the controversial pipeline contract given to the former agitator Tom Polo is now paying off? Would you say, should we begin to celebrate, or what do you think is responsible for this rise?
False dilemma fallacy about these things. It will be, I feel it's a premature deduction to say it's as a result of that particular contract, and that's why we're actually having a pump in the oil price. Situations in Nigeria where it is not within policy that actually led to the success of something. So I don't think, I wouldn't say it is until the government or the NNPC tells us exactly what happened and how that translated to what we are having right now. It is a good thing. Is it a good thing? Yeah, it is a good thing. Doesn't make it a bad thing. We need to actually interrogate properly. We need to actually understand what happened first before we begin to say it's as a result of this particular policy or
Okay, Mukhtar. So with that, let's move on to, you know, we actually still, there was a report on that talking about fuel and fuel subsidy, and thank God that the fuel queues have actually subsided right now. But then IPMAN, as of now, is to actually get petrol directly from the NNPCL, and you know, this is the oil giant's move to end a shortage of fuel. What, share your thoughts on that?
It's so funny how I was discussing with somebody in the government sometime last week. We met outside of the country, and then he was telling me how this is what and it's a popular rumor now. How all of the four Qs are just deliberate strategies to see how the with us getting used to or accustomed to the price, so that it doesn't become too when eventually do. I think that's a very, very manipulative move, and it is totally wrong. My position about subsidy removal from the beginning has always been that if you remove, I also don't like forced subsidy. I think, but if you're going to remove the forced subsidy, ensure that it's adequate power supply in the country and the efficient and effective intra item of the ladder are not that affected. So going to looking the current happening in the country and how it has actually trickled to what IPMAN is trying to say and all of that. I think it's really, really sad and pathetic what is really happening in the country right now. The government agencies themselves have toward decisions like this. They're using a ghetto approach for government policy. That's actually a very, very big problem that we actually need to look into. I'm really hoping that this can actually, and I'm really hoping that we can actually push back up when they eventually do what they are going to do without actually letting it slide, because action should have consequences. Sometimes in democracy, that those consequences come from the large population of the country, which is us.
Okay, now, Mukhtar, let's move on to politics. And of course, the front pages this morning are full of war words, you know, and as the Sun captured it in its own very unique tabloid manner, that Tinubu Atiku fights dirty. And of course, you can see the dirt all over in Vanguard and other newspapers. Still, as we've seen earlier in this show, you know, one of the packages we watched, speak about how policy is still suffering at the expense of personal attacks and all these, grandstanding by all the candidates. What's happening? Is this something that you expected? Is this something that is that has some consequences in our, in terms of how voters actually access their own candidates and make a choice? Mukhtar, can you hear me? Okay, it's like we're having a little glitch with, with the network getting Mukhtar. And of course, we'll continue looking at some other stories on the okay, we've gotten Mukhtar back. Can you hear me, Mukhtar?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, do I have to go back to the question, or you've had the question I asked?
Oh, no, I got the question.
Okay, so I was asking about the politics and how the candidates, the two major candidates, at each other's throats, regarding their own personalities and all that, rather than discussing policies. I said, is this something that is healthy? Do you think this is healthy for us and for the electorate? Or what is your take on that?
said this anyway in the program, we need to actually check the ad hominem approach that people are using in campaigns. Does it mean that it's going to stop? Not really. I think character attack, character assassination is one very component of political campaigns anywhere in the world. We cannot take it away, but we can to a barest minimum. And the large, like salespeople, sell something to us, the larger population.
All right, well, we seem to be having issues with our connection, but I think with that, we have come to the end of the newspaper review right here on Daybreak. Thank you so much, Mukhtar Suleiman, public affairs analyst, for joining us to analyze some of the stories on the national dailies. We'll take a break, and when we come back at the top of the hour, the show continues.
But in a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that